Oh, hello there. Wherever you're listening, however you're listening, joining us live on the Reality After Show YouTube channel or joining us after the fact on the archived episode. It's all the same. It doesn't matter to me. If you are here live, though, thank you very much. It's so great to have you here. My name's Gabe Ortis. Welcome in to episode 3 of Gabe's Big Move. Can't wait to get into it. This is an episode that I've been wanting to do since I came up with the concept for Gabe's Big Move. And since I got to join the Reality After Show channel with Johnny Fairplay and so many of the other great people that work here. So getting into the theme, the question for tonight's episode, what does it mean to be a survivor villain? Now, that word villain is one of my favorite and least favorite words in the survivor lexicon. And I'll tell you why. It's because nobody really seems to know what it means in the first place. And it causes so much controversy, whether it's people deciding whether or not this person is actually a villain or if they're not, or if it's the showrunner and host of the show coming out saying he doesn't want to cast villains anymore and then casting more villains after saying that and then going back and saying those people aren't villains. But that's a story for another time. What really upsets me about the discourse around survivor villains, particularly in the modern day, particularly with the new era. And something that is very pertinent to the conversation we're having right now is that comment by Jeff, where he said, I don't really want to cast villains anymore. This was a couple years ago. I'm sure many people who are fans of the show and follow it remember that comment. And it sparked all this controversy of fans saying, well, this is awful because we need villains in the show. And well, he has been casting villains. This person's a villain and this person's a villain. And if you go into any Twitter thread or Reddit comment section, everyone's saying, no, they're not a villain. And no, yes, they are. And what I think I've come to realize, having played the game and having been a lifelong fan, is that all villains are not created equal. And there's a large spectrum of villains, varying in degree and type. And that's what I want to get into today, is what kinds of villains exist out there. And perhaps over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, we can actually get to the root of this question of what does it mean to be a villain. And I think it's much more complex and much more intricate than something that can be summed up in just a one sentence or one paragraph answer. If you're joining us on the live stream right now, the comment section is open. Please leave all your comments and your questions there for me. I always like to leave some time at the end of every episode to answer your questions, do a little bit of Q&A. It can be about tonight's episode. It can be about my time on 47. It can be just general survivor questions that you have curiosity about that you think I might have a good answer to. Leave them in the comment section as we go on. And for this episode, I would love for you to tell me who some of your favorite survivor villains are and who some of the people who maybe I missed out on or didn't name that fit some of the categories that we're going to get into over the course of the next 40 minutes or so. So with that idea, running with the idea that all villains are not created equal and often they vary in degree and type, I want to get into some of those different types of villains. And I want to start with what I believe is the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to being a survivor villain. And that's what I like to call the nuisance. These are players that don't play the game particularly well, and they make life around camp at best uncomfortable and at worst unbearable. They often don't make it far in the game, although there are exceptions to this. And just to lay out a couple of examples of the people I'm talking about, Rome from 47, for my personal experience, was a textbook nuisance type player, right? I look at Shamar from Fans versus Favorites too. This was a nuisance type player. Players that made it a bit further in the game, I would say Sharin, Liz from 46, Philip Shepard from Fans versus Favorites. These are, Fans versus Favorites too. But more so in his first season in Redemption Island. Both can apply for Philip Shepard though. Natalie in David versus Goliath. Brandon Hance, particularly in Fans versus Favorites too. Jatia from Cagayan is a perfect example of a nuisance type of villain. And don't get me wrong, these people are villains. They are bona fide villains. Everybody who I just named, I don't think anybody in the right mind would argue that they're not a villain. Does that mean that they deserve to be on the villains tribe? if they did a heroes versus villains 2? No. Does that mean that they're the same caliber of player as a Tyson or a Johnny Fairplay or a Boston Rob or a Tony? No, of course not. But it doesn't mean that they're not villains. And if you want to look at something like WWE wrestling or comic books, superhero movies, not every villain is Doctor Doom. Not every villain is Randy Orton. Not every heel is CM Punk. And that's good. That's a good thing. Sometimes you need the hero of the story, the babyface of your wrestling storyline, to take down some smaller hero, or villain of the week type of guys before they're ready to go take on the big bad. This is a story that is as old as fiction is. And I like that WWE and that superhero comparison because these are stories that are constant, much like Survivor. It's not like Lord of the Rings where there's a beginning and there's an end, like Star Wars where there's a beginning and there's an end, even though I think this claim I'm making applies to those stories like that. But I like the wrestling and the comic book one because these are constant stories where you're recycling these same archetypes of villains. And sometimes Spider-Man needs to beat up the Lizard a couple times before he's ready to go take on the Green Goblin. And I guess he's a heel now, so it doesn't quite work as well as for an analogy, but sometimes John Cena has to go beat up, Albert Rios or Santino a couple times in the ring before he's ready to go take on Triple H or before he's ready to go take on JBL or Shawn Michaels or whoever it may be. And Survivor is no different. Survivor is no different. You need those nuisance type players to be these small Bush League type players that probably aren't going to make it to the merge, definitely aren't going to make it to the jury in most cases. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. But oftentimes, you're not going to see those people make it that far for that reason, because they are just a nuisance. Some of the qualities that I'm talking about here are players that start a lot of fights, but don't exactly have the machismo, if you will, the muscle to actually win those fights, to come out of those fights looking like they are somebody who is really running things. And these players are often somebody who you're looking at your watch every episode wondering, when is their time going to be up? Again, Rome is a great example of this. Shamar is a great example of this. Jatia is a great example of this. These are players that you're like, okay, clearly this has to end at some point. And some of them slip through. Philip Shepard is a great example of a nuisance type player who managed to slip through. And he played with Boston Rob once, who Rob was as much of a veteran as you could possibly have, not just generally, but at that time of Redemption Island, who saw the value in bringing a nuisance to the end. But if you're playing in a season of a bunch of recruits, playing in a season with a bunch of newbies, oftentimes the nuisance isn't going to make it very far because people are trying so hard to adapt to this new lifestyle they have in playing Survivor, which is a very, very difficult thing. And it's something that it will never be properly translated through a television screen. And it's not by any fault of the producers or the editors. It's impossible to do because what you see on the show is an episode. What we're living on the island is a lifestyle. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if you make it that far. And so that's where I think a lot of people get the wrong impression of how players deal with nuisance type villains, how they deal with Rome's, how they deal with Shamar's, how they deal with Liz's, how they deal with Sharin's, how they deal with Jatia's, Philip Shepard's, Brandon Hanson, Natalie's. Is because people look at what Boston Rob did in Redemption Island, bringing a nuisance all the way to the end as this perfect shield and this perfect agent of disorientation to keep the target off of, at the time, Boston Rob's massive, massive back, right? I mean, he was the biggest head on the island, and he managed to make it all the way to the end for multiple reasons. But one of the big ones being that he had this Philip Shepard guy as his number 2 who constantly kept the attention away from him. But that's somebody who understood the lifestyle of playing Survivor, where nobody else did. And he understood how finite his time out there was. When you're out there for the first time, you would be shocked at how quickly your brain and your body adapts to that. Like, it only takes 5, 6, 7 days to get into the subconscious mindset of this is my life now. I know I got there. And if you're one of those people who is a nuisance around camp, who's constantly starting fights, who is constantly talking, who doesn't know when to shut the hell up, is kind of picking at people, nitpicking things around camp, not being very helpful, not being a good team player, it's something that makes that adjustment into playing Survivor and the Survivor lifestyle infinitely more difficult. Infinitely more difficult. And so that's why those players have to go. And because of all the things I just said, they're not very good at the game. They're not forming alliances that are going to last. They're not really directing any votes. The best case scenario for a nuisance type villain is to be Philip Shepard and have a good veteran player come along and take you under their wing and say, you're going to be my shield until we're sitting at Final Tribal and I win the game. That is the ceiling for a nuisance player, is to be a game-long shield for somebody that's actually going to go win. But these are not good players. And they'll never be good players because they don't even know how to control themselves, much less control the other people that they're playing with. That I would put at the bottom of the totem pole for the hierarchy of villain types and archetypes on Survivor. This moves us one rung up. The bully. Now, this is an obvious villain archetype, right? This is something that we see a whole lot throughout Survivor. I think in the new era, particularly in the early new era, 41 through 44, we started to not see this archetype. I think this is kind of what Jeff was talking about when he said, I don't want to cast villains anymore, was getting away from having bullies on the season. These are players, they brute force their way through the game. They see themselves as an alpha, and where a nuisance type villain will go out and they will pick at people and get into little petty fights. They always seem to be on the losing end of those fights. They always seem to lose stock and trust and value in their tribe at the end of all those fights. A bully, on the other hand, will macho man their way through that. And they will come out looking like an asshole, but still looking like the winner of these confrontations and conflicts that they get into during camp life, during challenges at tribal council, whatever it may be. And these type of players, they never, ever, ever win. But they have the potential to find early game success and to actually move votes forward and to actually say, I want this person out and they're going to go home. The nuisance can't do that. The nuisance villain can't do that. They don't have the sway. They don't have the influence. They don't have the allies. Where the bully does have the influence and does oftentimes have a few lackeys behind them that are saying, well, this guy's taking a lot of heat and he's calling the shots, so I'll listen to whatever he wants to do. Oh, we're going to get Tom out tonight, or Brittany, or whoever it may be. Okay, whatever you say, man. Whatever you say. But these players never actually have long-term success in the game because as people adapt more to this Survivor lifestyle of playing the game, they start to realize that the bullies, while they may have been a convenient home for somebody early in the game to just take orders, sir, yes, sir, whatever you want to do, just don't yell at me like you yelled at that person yesterday. The deeper you get into the game, the less you feel a need to have that home. The less you feel a need to keep those guys around, and often will feel good if you're the person that can orchestrate the blind side to get the bully out. Great examples of these. The first one that I'm sure jumped to many people's heads is Scott and Jason on Koorong, right? These are textbook bullies who just flex their muscles around. They were the biggest guys, scariest looking guys on their season. But of course their alliance fell apart when it did, despite the fact that they had early game success. Garrett Adelstein from Cagayan. Adelstein. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Another good bully type character, where maybe not as blunt as Scott and Jason were, he was still very much in the vibe of what I say goes, to the point where he was trying to dictate who other people were allowed to talk to. And not in a Boston Rob, cool, charming, mob boss type way. No, 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 no. He was doing it in a nobody should leave. Everybody should stay right here at camp where I can see you. And if you leave, then we are going to vote you out. And he ended up getting voted out because of that. This bully style, it never truly works. Colton, from One World, a great example of a bully. Somebody who was just kind of nasty to people and had this relentless nastiness that always seemed to outlast the person he was in conflict with. Now, Colton's a little bit of a special case because he ended up quitting. But oftentimes with bullies in real life and in Survivor, they're not as strong as they tried to make it seem. Ben Browning on Samoa, another great example of a bully player. Just being openly racist on the island, right? And that was somebody who, another player on that season, who we're going to talk about in a few minutes, really liked having around for the same reason that Boston Rob liked having Philip Shepard around, because he kept the heat off of him. But these bully players, they always hit a wall. They always will. Shannon Elkins in Nicaragua, another great example of a bully player. Somebody who was just openly homophobic, openly racist, was very unpleasant to be around, but not in a gnat around your ear nuisance kind of way, in a very openly bully way of, I'm going to tell you what I think about you, I'm going to demean you, I'm going to humiliate you, and I'm going to walk away from this feeling like the winner of this confrontation. And most recently, Say Hewley, a classic bully player, and somebody, by all the accounts of the exit press from other players, got a very generous edit on her time in 48. But this was another bully player who was chasing Mary around the island because she was so worried about her getting an idol, and was demanding that Cedric and Justin keep tabs on her, even when they said they didn't want to do that. Again, humiliating, demeaning other players, the way that she talked to Stephanie at the first tribal council. She was a textbook bully player, and she hit the wall that all of these lower end of the totem pole villains do. Because what they have in, for lack of a better term, negative energy, and what they have in brute force and perhaps often delusional alpha mindset, they lack in strategic acumen. They lack in charisma. They lack in smoothness. And that is a surefire way to make sure that you're not going to make it deep in this game. Maybe you'll make it to Murgatory, like Say did, like Rome did, but these players often hit a wall. And if they make it deep in the game, I find it's often because of the workings and plans of other more savvy players, not because of something that they create. So that is what I see as the bully. They often treat their other castaways terribly, both in confessionals and in camp life, with impunity, this self-ordained impunity, until they eventually get voted out. And I think an important distinction here about these kinds of players is that, much like the nuisance, I would say this is an overlap in archetype. They talk about their fellow castaways the same in confessionals that they do around camp. And that is a way that, unless you're playing a very honorable hero-like game, that is not the way that you should be conducting yourself. The person you are in confessionals should be very, very, very different than the person you are around camp, in challenges, at tribal council. And please, everybody, feel free right now in the chat to drop certain players that I haven't named that you think fit this archetype, or any of the archetypes that I've said so far. Give me some good nuisance players that I haven't named yet. Give me some good bully players that I haven't named yet. I would love to see them, and I'll throw them up right there on the screen. Here's a good throwback. Sonia Christopher, all the way back from Boreno, a classic bully player. Jean Robert from China, a great bully player, right? This is a guy who thought that he was king of the island until he got voted out. And so these bully type players, they're very frustrating to watch. And that's something that they also share with the nuisance type players. And it's one of the things, in addition to never really making it deep in the game. And if they do, it's never because of their own doing, that puts them on the bottom of the totem pole for me, is that they're not very fun to watch. Like, say it was fun to watch for a couple episodes, and then it got old and grating really fast. Rome was fun to watch for a couple episodes, and then it got old and grating really fast. And some of these people, like Shamar, like Jatia, like Garrett Adelstein, like Ben Browning, Shannon Elkins, they were never really fun to watch, right? Not even from the beginning were they fun to watch. It was kind of entertaining, I guess, in the beginning to say, like, oh, snap. Wow, this guy's really going after it. But quickly, it gets very old and tiring and borderline uncomfortable as a viewer to watch them play. And that's what puts them on the bottom of the totem pole, is that you are just waiting for them to leave because you can't stand them. And it's not in a I love to hate them kind of way. It's in a I need you off my screen because you're making me uncomfortable to watch kind of way. Or I just find you annoying and grating. So moving another rung up here on the totem pole of the villain archetype hierarchy of Survivor. If you're just joining us, episode 3 of Gabe's Big Move, we're answering the question right now, what does it mean to be a Survivor villain? And my take on it is that there is not one clear answer. Villains are existing on a spectrum of varying degrees, variety of type, and we're breaking down all those types right now. So we've gone through the bottom of the totem pole, the nuisance type player, ones that just make camp life unbearable. They're not very fun to watch on TV. They never really have a lot of influence or muscle in the game. They're kind of just like a gnat floating around your eyes and your ear, and you're trying to swat them away, and hopefully you get lucky, and eventually you clap it dead. Above that, I would say, is the bully. Pretty self-explanatory name. Somebody who flexes their muscles, gets into a lot of fights, is quite nasty to their fellow castaways, but never really makes it far in the game and get very old to watch very quickly. Now, I think that this is the point where we transition into genuinely likable villains. And I say that is the biggest distinction on the spectrum of villains. If you want to call it the middle point, the black and the white, whatever you want to call it, this is the biggest distinction between villains. And it's, are you likable to watch? Do I enjoy rooting for you as a villain, or do I even take pleasure in rooting against you in a way that I don't really want to see you leave, and when you go, I'm going to miss you? These are the chaos villains. They're players that are fun to watch because you never really know what they're going to do next. They bring something different than a lot of other castaways, both generally and on their specific cast, bring to the game in both a strategic and a social sense, whether it's starting fights at camp or haphazardly turning on an alliance member for no real reason or for just a petty reason. They bring a lot of fun and uncertainty to any given season. And oftentimes, they don't really even have particularly sound reasoning for making the moves they make, but it moves the season along all the same. That's another very important distinction to make about this kind of villain versus the first two we talked about. They move the season forward, where I think nuisance villains and bully villains stop the season in its tracks. 48 could not get moving forward until Say left. 47, not quite as much, but couldn't get moving forward until Rome left. And these chaotic type players, they push the season forward. They make you look forward to next week. They make you anticipate, or not anticipate, but get anxious in the best possible way of what's going to happen Wednesday night on Survivor. Great examples of these type of players. Chaos Cass, obviously. It's literally in the name. It was whose name is she going to throw under the bus next? What blind side is she going to blow up by blabbing it to everybody at camp? Who is she going to aim to take out next, whether it's a sound reason or not? This is somebody who was quintessential. Again, it's in the name, Chaos Cash. She was a quintessential chaotic villain, flipping people off at tribal council and on the jury, saying it like it is. And you got to respect that. And even for people who hate Cass, you got to admit you love to hate her. Somebody that me and Johnny are going to be talking with in about 20 minutes, Abby Maria Gomez. You never knew what Abby was going to do week to week. She was a fantastic chaotic villain. Getting into camp, getting into fights at camp with people over personal belongings, over things that she may have heard, over interpersonal petty conflicts, but in an engaging and fun way to watch. Something that made you want to keep her on the TV screen, even if you were somebody that couldn't stand her. A great example of a chaotic villain. Did she ever really have a chance of winning? Probably not. Did Chaos Cass ever really have a chance of winning? Probably not. But boy, were they great additions to the Survivor universe. Shane Powers as a throwback for you. Maybe one of the first proper chaotic villains where you never knew what the hell this guy was going to say or how he was going to move. And he's one of the people that's often at the top of the list for former players that should get called back that haven't before. Courtney Yates, another great chaotic villain. Getting into fights with people, saying crazy stuff in confessionals, bringing a kind of pettiness that was actually fun to watch and not just annoying. A fantastic casting and a fantastic chaotic villain. To give you a modern example in the new era, Q is as chaotic of a chaos villain as you could possibly get. That's a guy who you really never knew who he was going to go after, what he was going to say, what his reasoning for going after somebody was. It could be something as simple as they answered, "Who is your favorite survivor?" Answering that question wrong was sometimes all it took for Q to throw all of his influence and all of his energy towards getting you out of the game. Oh, you were too good at hide and go seek, a children's game. We got to get you out of here. Like, this is quintessential chaotic villain. It is somebody who, even if you hate them, you got to admit a small part of you loves to hate them. It's not somebody who you're tearing your hair out just saying, get them off the screen. They're not a good member of the cast. They're not adding anything to this. They're just stopping it cold in its tracks. No, the chaotic villain moves the season forward, and they are a joy to watch most of the time. I would also put one of my personal favorite villains, Randy Bailey, in this category. I think he kind of flirts between the line of chaos villain and a bully. He was quite nasty to a lot of his other castaways, but everybody on Gabon was quite nasty to each other, if we're just being honest here. So I don't think that maybe there's a weighted system here of what cast you have to play with and where you have to play and what era you're playing in for where you fall on this totem pole. But Randy is one of my all-time favorite players, and I think he flirts the line between chaos and between bully, because as nasty as Randy could be to the people around him, he was great to watch. I'm sorry. That's a hill I will die on. Randy Bailey was amazing to watch, and boy, would I love to meet him in real life. So these chaotic villains are somebody who you never know what they're going to do in a very invigorating, captivating way. And when they do things in the game, when they play the game, when they pick fights, whenever they do anything, it moves the game and the season forward, unlike the nuisance archetype, unlike the bully archetype. Now we're getting into where I think a lot of people's favorite players start to come into play, or their favorite villains, rather, start to come into play. The Cutthroat. These are players that often are actively fun to watch. They cut alliance members and they flip-flop through alliances like it means nothing. To quote one of the great examples of a cutthroat player, maybe the original true cutthroat player, Brian Hiddick, they play Survivor as a business trip, right? There are no emotions here. Emotions take a back seat to their gameplay, and often the emotions don't even get a seat in the car. These are some of the best players to watch. They move the game forward constantly with meaningful strategy and what I think most people would call a game bot's dream type player. Andy Rueda from season 47 is a great example of this. Genevieve, also from season 47, is a great example of this. We already talked about Brian. Missy from season 39, I think, is another great example of this. These are players that bring a level of strategic acumen and a coldness. Brian's nickname was literally Mr. Freeze. A coldness to the game that is so fun to watch. And I think it often makes people wonder, could I do that if I was out there? And I hope I could. They leave emotion at the door. In this case, on the boat when they get into the island. They have no interest in making friends. They have no interest in being a fan favorite or a hero. They are out there to win $1 million and the title of Sole Survivor. And they often don't care about how many dreams they have to crush on the way there or how many alliances or promises they have to break to do it. These are some of the great players in Survivor. And what really captivates me about these cutthroat players is, again, they push the game forward, even more so than these chaotic players do. They have a manner of playing the game where you want to see just how far their strategy can take them. You want to see just where the line of coldness and lack of emotion and just being a human and playing this game, where that line is. And often it's a very blurry line for many of them. The cutthroat type player is somebody that revels in a blind side and revels in seeing somebody's torch get snuffed. I obviously know Andy and Genevieve very close personally. Those are some of my closest friends, not just in Survivor, in the world. And boy, are they cutthroat. Genevieve had how many different confessionals talking about she needs to leave her emotions out of this. And as soon as she let her emotions seep into the game, she realized just how detrimental it could be. Andy would blindside anybody just to do it. Towards the end, I think he was blindsiding people just because he thought it was fun. That is a proper cutthroat type player. And boy, are they great to watch. They are so fun to watch. They are what keeps the meta and the gameplay and the strategy of Survivor alive season in, season out. And I think season 48, not to take a jab here, I think season 48 really suffered from not really having those cutthroat type players on the cast. And if they did exist, they all got swept away in the first few episodes of the season. But boy, do I love a good cutthroat player. And that brings us towards the end of the totem pole. For what does it mean to be a Survivor villain and the hierarchy of that archetype? I just call this the best. This is the pantheon of Survivor villains. They're beloved by fans and fellow players alike. They ooze charisma in their confessionals, and oftentimes are one of the most liked people around camp. And we're going to get into that here in a second, because they're not acknowledged as villains by those that they play with. And this is what makes the best villains the best, is that around camp, they're quite liked. Boston Rob, Tyson, Johnny Fairplay, Parvati, Sandra, Jerry, Richard Hatch. Around camp, these people are liked, if not loved, by their fellow castaways. Many of them are seen as the spirit of their camp, the person that makes people laugh, the person that makes people forget how hungry they are, how tired they are, how homesick they are. They have to play this very brutal, manipulative game. These are the best because around camp, that's who they are, the person I just described. And once they get into that confessional, their mask comes off and they have this special bond with the audience where they get to say, can you believe that they're buying this? Can you believe that all these people around camp don't know how much shit I'm talking on their name to you, the audience in this confessional right now? I can't believe it. They're eating up everything I have to give them out of the palm of my hand. And that is what makes the best villains the best. They have all the attributes of a cutthroat, but they also have the charisma and the savvy to make them just so damn likable and pop off the screen. Parvati is one of the biggest villains the show's ever seen, and any season she plays on, she's one of the most loved people among her cast when they're actually playing. Boston Rob, Tyson. Yes, fair play. One of the most, and I mean this with love, not just because he's the boss man, one of the most detestable players in the history of Survivor, was loved by the Pearl Islands cast when they were playing. And what they all know how to do is pick their moment to take this villain personality they've built up in their confessionals and let it loose in front of everybody. And boy, is that a satisfying moment when they nail it. When they nail that, it is a great TV moment. It is a great gameplay moment where everybody around camp has to go, oh my God, I have been eating this dude's BS for weeks now. And now he reveals his real self. And I had no idea. And the reason that's so satisfying is because us as the audience, we knew the whole time who this person was. And we got to be in on the fun through the confessionals about how villainous, how cutthroat, how backstabby and disingenuous this guy was. And we got to sit up in the peanut gallery and laugh at the other people on this cast that had no idea. And when that moment gets revealed about how villainous and cutthroat and untrustworthy they truly are, it is Survivor gold. And these players, unlike the chaos villain, unlike the bully villain, unlike the nuisance, have the strategic acumen, have the charisma, have the influence, have the self-awareness to not only make it far in this game, but often win. I mean, how many winners exist within that list I just said? Boston Rob, Tony, Tyson, Parvati, Sandra. I would also throw Jerry in that category. Jerry Manthe is this villain that oozed charisma, that was so good in confessionals, and was so beloved around camp. These villains, the best, the Pantheon, are able to put on the mask when they're dealing with their other castaways and take it off just as easy in that confessional when they're talking to you and me. It is a chef's kiss when you watch these villains go out and play Survivor. Now, as we wrap up here, we have to wrap up a bit early because me and Johnny, again, in about 7 minutes here, are going to be talking to Abby Maria Gomez right here on the Reality After Show. So don't go anywhere about her journey of casting through 50 and thinking she was going to be on up until the last second and then eventually getting cut. But there's one name that I'm sure many people are wondering, when are they going to come into the fold here? And the answer is right now. This is at the top of the totem pole. Not when it comes to Survivor player, not when it comes to Survivor resume, when it comes to the Survivor villain archetype. This is the ultimate. Russell Hantz. He is the ultimate Survivor villain. Why? Not because he's won the most times, not because he's made it the deepest, because he encompasses every single category that we have gone through so far. Russell Hantz is a nuisance. He is somebody that people hate around camp from day one. Russell Hantz is a bully. He gets into these spats with people and he just brute forces his way through these conflicts and walks away with his head held high and his chest puffed out, despite everybody in camp thinking that he looks like an asshole. He is chaotic. You never know what that dude is going to say next. You never know what he's going to do next. You never know when he's going to find another immunity idol. You never know when he's going to blindside somebody out of their pants. You have no idea what this guy is going to do week to week. He is a cutthroat. He is a cutthroat's cutthroat. He will look at you in your face, show you an idol, and vote you out that very same night. A strategic mastermind. And he is certainly, whether you love him or you hate him, one of the best villains to ever play this game. And you would not be the singular ultimate villain unless you could never win this game. And Russell could never win this game because he is that much of a villain. He goes deeper into that territory than anybody ever has, and probably more than anybody ever will. Russell Hantz is at the top of the totem pole when it comes to what does it mean to be a villain on Survivor. It's Russell. He will never win the game because he has all of the attributes that we've talked about over the last 40 minutes. He is a nuisance. He is a bully. He is chaotic. He is a cutthroat, and he is one of the best. And that, to me, is what it means to be a Survivor villain. Falling in to one of those categories that I just listed out. Now, there's one person that I've talked about before on this channel that a lot of people are mentioning, right? And of course, it's somebody who we are going to see on Survivor 50. Coach Wade. He was cast on the Villains Tribe in Heroes versus Villains, but what strikes me about Coach is that he is somebody who can kind of be who you want him to be. For many people, Coach is a hero. People adore Coach. They take a lot away from, his brazenness. He takes a lot away from his brazenness of the way that he tells stories. This blurred line of reality of what's true that Coach says and what's not. His journey as the Dragon Slayer. His willingness to self-sacrifice for the game. And this larger-than-life personality that he brings to Survivor. Some people look at him as a hero. And some people can't stand him and look at him as a villain. And he is one of the few gray characters that I would label in Survivor, where truly beauty is in the eye of the beholder when it comes to Coach Wade. If you hate him, he's a villain. But if you love him, boy, is he a hero. So that right there is my pantheon, my totem pole, my definition of what does it mean to be a villain in the game of Survivor. And I see a lot of people in here throwing some good shouts out. Jesse is my favorite New Era villain. Jesse is a great villain. I struggle with Jesse as a villain. I would call him a cutthroat, right? I would put him in that cutthroat category, and I think that he is great there. But in his confessionals, I felt like he never properly owned his status as a villain. I feel like he was constantly crying in his confessionals, talking a whole lot about how he doesn't really feel great about what he's doing. And yeah, that's tough. But I feel like the best villains revel in their villainy, revel in being a heel. And Jesse never really reveled in it. Did he have very villainous action and very villainous gameplay? Absolutely he did. But I think he lacked that little bit of charisma and that ownership of his villainy to be out and out, you are a Survivor villain. But I wouldn't be upset putting him down as a cutthroat archetype. I think that's totally fair. Go ahead, drop in the chat. Who are some villains that you don't think I named? Who are some people that you think I missed out on, or rather just left out? And if you do name somebody that I didn't name, let me know what archetype you think they belong in. Are they a nuisance? Are they a bully? Are they chaotic? Are they a cutthroat? Or are they one of the best? I think I got most of the best on there, though, to be honest. Corinne is another great shout. I mean, if that's not a bully, I don't know what is. That's a great shout that I wish I had put in there from the beginning. Corinne is a quintessential bully type of villain. Corinne's probably never going to win a game of Survivor. And I say probably because you never actually know how these things are going to shake out. But boy, was Corinne a great villain and a great bully at that. One of the few, I would say, that was actually quite entertaining to watch. Joel from Micronesia. This is, jog my memory, this is the guy that dragged Chet behind him in the challenge, right? I banged my head. I don't care. I know, right? That's Joel from Micronesia. Quintessential bully. John Rocker as well. Another great macho type bully character in the Survivor world. I mean, these are like textbook. Yes, he dragged Chet through the mud. Yes, exactly. Exactly who I'm thinking of. Does Sierra count because she voted out her mom? I would say no, because I don't think that she really had much of a choice there. I think that she always needed to vote out her mom at that point. I don't think she took a whole lot of joy in it. I don't think it was like, ooh, I get to blindside my mom tonight. I think it was kind of more of a somber, like, I have to do this kind of thing. So I don't know if I would put her quite in that villain territory. So I'll tell you what, me and Johnny Fairplay on the other side of this hour got Abby Maria Gomez coming up, talking about her journey through casting of season 50, talking a little bit about how she got cut at the last second. We're going to get her take on that. We're going to get her reaction to being such a late cut and the season 50 cast in general. So really, really excited to talk with Abby Maria Gomez in just a few minutes here. Do not go anywhere. I'll be going live with Johnny in just a few minutes. So stick around. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 3 of Gabe's Big Move. This is an episode I've been wanting to do for a while. I cannot wait for this off season to just tackle so many more of these philosophical type Survivor questions. And this is one that I think is on the tip of everybody's tongue whenever you talk about Survivor philosophy. So thank you so much to everybody who commented. Big shout out to Daryl Seymour, who's always here. Big shout out to Brian Kelly, who's always here. Big shout out to Sam Red, CM33, Oded, and so many more people here in the comments. Kate the Great One, Fender, thank you so much. Johnny Fairplay himself even had something to say here in the comment section. Mike NADJJ, Mike NADJJ, thank you so much. Appreciate all you guys for joining me here in the comment section tonight. This was such a fun episode. I love doing this so much every single week. It is one of the coolest things that I get to be a part of, is being on the Reality After Show Network and getting to do Gabe's Big Move. So thank you so much, guys. In just a few minutes, stick around on the channel. Me and Johnny are going to be going live with Abby Maria Gomez. Talk to you soon.